This video is a follow-up on our previous discussions of your proposal and the next steps after creating the proposal. So hopefully this will help you if you're still in the process of putting together that initial proposal, if you've already done the proposal and now we're working to refine it, and for thinking about the next steps in the process of completing this project. Okay, so that's what I'm going to cover in this video. So the proposal, this is, for this semester, spring 2023, the proposal was due on January 31st. So you're either in the process of revising it now or of creating the original one. Either way, this is the set of things that I asked you to produce for the proposal. And I just want to talk a little bit about each of them to make sure it's clear. So what I asked you to submit for your proposal is your topic, a research question about that topic, a quick description of what kind of data or evidence you'll pull on for this project, and then finally at least one source, right? So those are the four things you need to put into this initial proposal. And first I want to talk about what all I'm going to cover here, and then we'll talk about each component of the proposal, okay? So sort of the point we're at right now is for you to work on finalizing your proposal, meaning you understand what your topic is, you understand, at least for now, what your initial research question is, and you understand what kind of data you're going to use. And then we'll talk more about the next step, which is going to be finding more literature, more scholarly sources that can provide context for what you're specifically doing in terms of your topic in question, okay? So once we've got these proposals finalized, then you'll be searching for sources and identifying what the best sources are, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what that looks like. And then subsequently, you'll be writing a literature review, okay? You're not quite there yet, but in this video, I also want to provide a really quick sort of overview of what a literature review looks like so you know where we're heading, and also a very quick sort of overview of the kinds of citations that you'll be using, and where to find information about that, okay? All right. Okay, so your topic. And both of you have, already floated some ideas about what you might do. What I encourage you in terms of topics to be as purposeful and thoughtful about it as you can be, right? Meaning try to really think about something that you're interested in, either because you learned about it in a previous course and you found it really interesting, or because it's related to your future career goals, or whatever it may be. It can just be sort of a personal interest, that's fine. It can be something that seems really important in the world right now. All of those are good reasons to choose something, but I do encourage you to really think about why you are interested in a particular topic. You're going to spend a lot of time on this, and you're going to produce something that will hopefully be useful to you, right? Sort of moving forward. It's something you can put on a resume, etc. So make sure that it's well tailored to your interests and your goals. Okay. So the topic is a relatively straightforward part. A somewhat more challenging part is coming up with a question about that topic, a research question. And so what I have here are, sort of what I think are some of the key characteristics of a good research question. And that is these four sort of qualities, right? That a good question will be relevant, it will be clear, it'll be what I'm calling a good faith question, which I'll explain, and it'll be researchable. Okay, it's fine if your initial research question doesn't meet these criteria. That's what we will work on refining over time. But this is sort of what we're shooting for, okay? Relevant means that it is relevant to either the ongoing sort of scholarship on your subject, meaning once you've read what other researchers have said about this, your question makes sense as a question to ask, given what we know and what we don't know about your topic, okay? So meaning you're filling in a missing piece that nobody's really pursued before, or you're making broader connections, or a new kind of comparison, or critique, whatever it may be, right? So it can be relevant in terms of the existing scholarship on your topic. Relevance can also be in terms of what's going on in the world. So maybe something new is happening in everyday life, and that is what makes your question relevant at this moment in time. Okay, so that's making sure your question is relevant. The second characteristic is that your research question should be clear. Clear often means just straightforward, a short, simple question in a lot of ways. It may be a question that is asking something profound, but the question itself doesn't need to be complicated, right? So you want your question to be somewhat focused, right? And specific, with a limited number of variables, right? Like you're comparing 2 things, not 47 things, right? Again, you want your project to have some depth to it, but the way to get to depth is not by having a big, open-ended, vague question, right? In fact, it works better to have a pretty specific, defined question, and then use that as a window onto much bigger issues, okay? So a clear, relevant and clear research question. Third characteristic is what I'm saying is a good faith question. What that means is that your question is asking something that we really don't know the answer to. So in other words, it's not like a leading question where like it's already decided, right? What's going to be the answer to that. Instead, you want it to be something that genuinely, is not known or is not well known, and that you're asking that question because you think it's important to figure out the answer, okay? So that's the third characteristic. So we have relevant, clear, and a good faith question. And then the final one is that it's researchable. And what I mean by that is that it's something that you can actually do, given the limitations, right? This is not, you're not writing a dissertation. You're not going to spend 5 years researching this. So it needs to be something that is the right sort of size and scope for the period of time, right? Meaning this semester, and for what you have access to, right? Again, you don't have the time or the resources to go do original, field research in another part of the world or whatever. So make sure you, again, tailor what you're doing and what you're asking about your topic to what you can pull off in the context of this course and where you're at, okay? So those are, as you're writing a research question, or if you've already written one, as you're refining it to move forward with the project, look at it and see if you think it fits with these 4 characteristics, okay? Now, in terms of the process of getting to a good research question, one technique that I think is useful, and especially if you're struggling with figuring out a research question, this can be a good technique, which I have at the bottom of the slide here, is that it sometimes helps to start by writing what some people call a splurged list, which means don't try to zero in on one perfect question, but just write out every question you can possibly come up with about your topic, like a big laundry list of topics, right? Or of questions, right? So that's a way to just sort of think through what do I want to know about this subject, right? And once you have that big long list, you can start looking at those questions and maybe even sort of lumping them together or categorizing them. Like maybe, okay, these 3 questions are sort of about this part, these other 3 questions are about this part. And through doing that and sort of looking through them, you can figure out, what are the themes that are coming out in my questions, and which of them is the most important, and which of them maybe rises to the top as a better choice, right? So ultimately, you do want to have that one question, but you don't need to pull it out of a hat on the first try, right? So one approach is to write out all the questions, and then you have sort of some material to work with to try to get to that one best question that you're going to use, okay? All right, so that is questions. The third component of the proposal is data. And at this stage, all I want you to do is identify what kind of data or evidence you're gonna draw on, okay? You don't need to have compiled it all or analyzed or any of that. I just want you to start to figure out what is some data out there that feels like it's relevant to what I want to do and I can get a hold of it, okay? Again, in the context of this, we're doing this in one semester, you're not going to go, do 500 in-depth interviews with people, right? You're going to do something that you can access. So some of the kinds of places to look or the kinds of data to look for, there are lots of, good statistics online. Lots of government agencies post reports and data sets around whatever their subject is. International organizations do the same. If you're interested in some global phenomenon, looking at, for example, what the UN posts, right? The UN has a significant online presence, and all the different sort of departments within the UN, do a lot of research and will post data, right? If you want to know what is the incidence of disease, of a certain disease across the world? Like, you can find that information, right? Or World Health Organization, depends on your topic, right? But look for either government or, big legitimate international organizations, not just sort of random stuff that's on the internet, but identifiable legitimate organizations. Those can be sources of information. Depending on what you're looking at, again, if you're interested in something that has a sort of legal aspect, looking at legislation, right? Looking at the laws in different places over time. That's, again, publicly available. Things like interviews and surveys are possible, but again, it depends on your topic and it depends on sort of how you'll go about them. They take a little bit more time. You can look at historical documents. A lot of stuff is available even through the library's databases. Again, depending on your topic, I've had students do their projects on various media-related issues, and they've done things like track social media posts on a certain subject, right? Or look at media images, right, and analyze them. So again, all of that stuff is sort of public stuff that you can pretty readily access through the internet, through the library, and that can provide you with some kind of data that will complement what you're finding in the library research that you're doing on your topic, okay? So again, for the proposal, I just want you to identify, like, what is it? Like, take a quick look around at what's available on your subject and indicate what it might be for this. We can always add to it or shift it over time, but I want you to at least do the first pass on what the data part of your project will look like, okay? Okay. So the final part of the proposal is asking you to identify at least one scholarly source. After the proposal, sort of moving forward, you're going to need to find a lot more sources. So I want to make sure that you have a basic understanding of how to find sources. I think you have certainly done this before, right? You're well advanced in your time at Northeastern, so you've written papers before. So this is probably more of a review. But just wanted to make sure that sort of, again, you know where to go, you know where to look for the sources, okay? I was going to start by just a really basic sort of a little bit of background about different kinds of sources that are out there, so you know how to figure out the best or the right kind of sources for your project. And one way to think about categories of sources is primary, secondary, and tertiary, okay? So primary sources are sort of unprocessed original material. So something like if you do an interview with someone and you have the interview transcript, right? So it's just sort of the material that hasn't been analyzed by anybody yet, right? Secondary sources, which is the bulk of what you will be working on, is the analysis, the published analysis of research findings by somebody, typically for this kind of project, somebody who's an established scholar who's publishing in a peer-reviewed journal or through an academic press, right? So secondary literature is like all the journal articles that you'll be pulling out of library databases, right? Tertiary sources are things like textbooks, right? Which are not usually relevant for a project like this one. And it goes 1, 2, 3, right? That's primary, secondary, tertiary. So textbooks take what is published in the secondary literature and then process it further, right? So they'll say, here's what people are saying. Another sort of tertiary source would be something like a review article. So for the most part, with rare exceptions, the literature that you are looking for is secondary literature. So that is journal articles published in, again, academic databases through the library, or academic books, which you'll find through the library catalog, okay? You can find some of that in other ways, not through the library, like, for example, if you use Google Scholar, right? And I'll show you a few of the databases in a second, but most of what you will be looking for is secondary literature, okay? So, yeah, as I've already started to say, the form that literature comes in is going to be books, right? Single authored books, many of which are available electronically now. So it doesn't mean you need to go get the hard copy. You can do that as well, but when you use the library's catalog, you'll see that some of them you can just look at online. Edited volumes, which are books, right? They come in book form, but they are the work of multiple authors, right? So an edited volume is sort of a compiled set of writings from a bunch of different scholars on a certain subject, okay? And then journal articles. And probably much of what you're going to be working with for this project is going to come in the form of journal articles. I strongly encourage you to also find out if there are relevant books on your subject. But again, many of the things you'll find will be in the form of journal articles. Most of which will be available to you in a full text online version through the Northeastern Library's databases, okay? All right, so that's sort of an overview. So, the resources that you'll need to pull from, and again, I'm assuming that you have some familiarity with this. I'll give a quick overview. If you find that any of these are sort of unfamiliar or you need more help, I'm happy to sit down with you one-on-one and give more details about these sort of spaces that you can go to find your sources, okay? The primary place you're going to start, and again, I'll show you in a minute on the actual library website. The primary place you're going to start is the Northeastern Library website, right? Through that, you can find both the catalog, where you can find things like books, and that includes both what Northeastern has in the Northeastern Library, and also other stuff that you can access. Northeastern shares library privileges with other universities. So there's a consortium called iShare. So even through the Northeastern Library website, you can get a hold of books from other libraries, right? Which they will send over to the Northeastern Library that you can pick up, right? Or interlibrary loan, where even beyond the Illinois libraries, you can, if something's not available, you can often request it and get it sent to Northeastern so you can look at it. And or they will even do stuff like scan journal articles and send you the PDF. So you have access to a ton of stuff, even if Northeastern doesn't have it in the actual Northeastern Library, okay? So that's for primarily what I'm talking about here is things like books, right? In addition, you have all of the electronic journal article databases that Northeastern has, that Northeastern subscribes to. And there's a ton, right? Again, I'll show you the page in a second. But I've listed here a few that I think are probably ones that'll be useful for you. The Annual Reviews Journal is one that is a good starting place because all of the articles in the annual reviews are what are called review articles, meaning that somebody sort of takes a step back from a certain subject and goes, okay, here's all the stuff that scholars in this field have been writing about this subject for the last 20 years or whatever it is, right? So it's not an article, typically these review articles are not an article that's trying to present like new original data or make a new argument. It's more like they're giving an overview and a sort of a lay of the land to people who want to quickly get up to speed on a subject. So instead of you having to go out and read 30 articles just to know, like, what have people already said, you can read one of these review articles and they'll sort of give you, you know, again, the quick version of here's what's being done in this field on this subject, okay? So it's a good starting place often for a project. And then the other two are just ones that have they represent a lot of different fields. They're interdisciplinary, they're full text, so a lot of students find them useful. One is this Academic Search Ultimate, which I'm sure you've used, which has all kinds of stuff from all kinds of fields. And then JSTOR is another one. So you can either just do general searches where you look across all the fields and just try to figure out, like, what are all the different things on my subject? Or you can also tailor them if you do a more specific search. So if you're interested in just what political scientists are saying about this, or just what economists, or just what sociologists, you can also be more specific, right? So they're very flexible. They have a lot of things in them. So again, they're often quite useful. You can get more specific. If you, for example, do a search in Academic Search Ultimate on your subject, and you find that a certain journal keeps coming up multiple times, you may want to go look for that journal by title, right? Which you can also do, and just see, like, you know, what is being published in this journal, because it seems to be on my subject. So there might be other things you can find that way. You can also use this internet source, which is called Google Scholar. So that would be sort of outside of the library's holdings. But be clear that you're using Google Scholar and not just Google, not just sort of doing a general search on the internet. Google Scholar brings up academic sources. What you want for this project is peer-reviewed scholarly sources, okay? What that means is that these are sources that have been basically reviewed by experts in the field, right? So that their findings are more verified, right? If you just go on the internet, you'll find all kinds of stuff of people just sort of, you know, spouting off about stuff that they may or may not have a lot of evidence for. So you want to make sure that you're using those academic, those peer-reviewed, those scholarly sources, okay? So that's why if you do want to use the internet, right, in addition, you definitely should be using these Northeastern Library sources. If in addition you want to look on Google Scholar, that's fine, but make sure it's Google Scholar and not just, again, a generic internet search. This I put on here really just for sort of interest's sake. Some students find it very useful to use these reference management programs. Mendeley is one example. There are a bunch of other ones out there, which is basically a program, and some of them are free, right? Mendeley has a free version, so you want to make sure you find a free one, where you can easily sort of import, if you find stuff in a database search, you could import those citations into this place, or even those entire sources into this place. It's just a sort of organizational program that helps you to keep track. When you're dealing with a bunch of different sources, it can sometimes get kind of confusing. So if you want to have a more organized approach, you can use one of these programs. You can also just save stuff in a folder on your computer or whatever it is, right? But I reference that just to make sure you're aware of it, and if you want to use it, then you can check it out, okay? And if you have any questions about that, again, let me know. All right. Let me actually pause here before we talk more about evaluating sources and show you directly on the library's website where the things that I've just been talking about are located. So let me show you that for a moment. Okay, so here we are in Newport, and I'm going to go to this library icon, which will take me to the library's homepage or website, right? This is where you're going to identify all of those things that I was just talking about, all those places to find your sources, right? So when you click on the library icon, you come here, right, to the NAIU Libraries page. The stuff that I've been describing is all these things over here, right? This is where you look for books. This is where you can find those databases that I mentioned. This is where you can find a specific journal, right? If you like look in the databases and you go like, oh, this, you know, this particular journal, you know, the Journal of Sociology, whatever, has a lot of great stuff. I'm going to go find that specific journal here. And then this is also useful. On the handout about the proposal that hopefully you've already read by now, one of the links I also give you is to the research guide for global studies. That's another great place to look because that has a list of databases that are useful and other information. And you can also, if you need to, connect with the librarian there, okay? So let me just quickly show you what each of these four looks like so that when you get here, you know how to proceed, okay? So this is where you're going to look in the library's catalog for books. For any of these, it's a good idea to always use the advanced search instead of just sticking something in here. It allows you to be more specific, right? So just always click on advanced search, all right? So here we are looking for books, right? And you see across the top, I mentioned that you can access stuff that's beyond what just our library has. So, you know, you can start with Northeastern libraries if you want, but you can also look at all the iShare, that's all the Illinois libraries that are connected to Northeastern's library, or you can look beyond that, right? So what I would probably start with is the iShare libraries, because that, you know, Northeastern's holdings are relatively small. This gives you quite a bit bigger pool to draw from, and it's also really easy to get a hold of those things if you do find something from beyond Northeastern, okay? So this is where I'm going to do my searching, right? And you can be, you know, as specific or as general as you want to. You might, if you're starting with a general search, you're just at the beginning, you can keep it on any field, right? This part, you can either just keep it open, which is what any field means, or if you are looking for something with a specific title or a specific author, you can also narrow it down. So let's say we're interested in globalization and, I don't know, let's say I'm interested in film. Maybe I'm interested in African film, which is a subject I find interesting. Let's say we do that, and let's see what we find. So we do a search. All right. So this is what I've come up with. And if I were doing a project on, you know, the African film industry, right? Some of these could be quite interesting, right? Here's one. It's about cinemas in South Africa, right, in the post-apartheid era. So if I just want to see, like, well, okay, that sounds cool, but what can I learn about it? You can also, down here, see a little bit more information, right? Like, this gives you the titles of all the chapters, right? So it helps you sort of get a better sense of, like, what it's about. And then if I am interested in it, I can, if I wanted to, right? Like if I want the book, the physical book, Northeastern doesn't own it, but it's owned by the UIUC, right? The University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. So if I want to, I can get this library to send it to Northeastern for me to borrow it and use it, right? In this particular case, it happens to also be available online. So even easier, I can go like this. I have to sign in to see it. Let's do that. I'll show you what it looks like. So this is just your Northeastern sign-in, right? As a member of Northeastern, you can use it. Here it is. So I'm going to do available online. So here is the electronic version, and I can actually download the whole thing if I really want to, or I can just read it online, right? So this is, you know, the whole book. So here's, if I want to read chapter 3, here it is, right? So again, back to what came up in our search. Right? So that was that first one. Happens to be available online. Fabulous. Some of them are not, right? You're going to have to get the book itself. Like there's not an ebook version, or there isn't an ebook version available. So say I want this. Again, we see who owns it in the Illinois libraries. Northeastern doesn't own it, so I can't just run over it, but I can order it through iShare, right? And it's super easy. Just click on that thing that says request a copy or request next copy. It already preloads the information, and all you have to do is hit send request. You're already logged in. It has your information. It's really, really straightforward. Okay. So, so don't be scared off by Northeastern not owning a book. You can get this. My experience is that it comes within a few days. It's super fast. Okay. So, back here, right, back to the library homepage, that's where we just went to find books. Now, another place we can look is in the library's databases, right? And there's a whole bunch. And if you haven't ever, it's a useful exercise to just scroll through all of them and see what all we've got, right? These are all the databases that the library has access to, right? So, so there's a whole slew of them, and you can find some that are more and less relevant to what you want to do. One of the ones that I mentioned is this Academic Search Ultimate, right? Because it's popular, it's easy to use, and it's got a lot of things that could be relevant. Again, here we are. When we click on it, we come to this general page. It's a basic search. I always encourage you to go to the advanced search. It just allows you to do a more, I think, effective kind of search. All right. So same thing that we were doing on the catalog. You're going to put your subjects in here. So again, let's say I want to do my project on globalization and film in Africa. And I do my search. And again, you know, depending on how specific my terms were or how many terms I put in, sometimes you'll find it's so many things that you need to narrow it down more. The more search terms you put in, the more narrow it becomes, okay? But either, whether you have a very narrow search or a broader search, this is the part where you do have to do a little bit of just sifting through it, right? So, you know, this came up. It's ordered in terms of relevance according to the algorithm that this database uses. So in theory, the more relevant ones are at the top of the list. That may or may not be true. You can also order it by stuff like date, right? So you might start with looking at what does it say is the most relevant. But if you're also looking at like what's the most recent scholarship on this subject, then going to the newest date is also a useful thing, right? So you maybe try both of them and see what you get. So, you know, again, some of these things don't seem to be really about the film industry, so I may need to shift my search terms, right? Some of this, you know, seems relevant. Here's one about sort of global film and the way that the U.S. film industry dominates. So if I'm interested in the role of the African film industry, this might also be useful because it provides sort of that baseline or that background, right? So, you know, again, if I were really doing this project or doing it right now, I would, here's an interesting one, right? Here's about video productions in Ghana. That's interesting. Right, so I'm going to have to, even once I've done the search and I get the list, it's not like the top 3 are going to be necessarily relevant to my project. I need to still look through them, okay? So again, that's going back to our library homepage. We've looked books here, we've looked databases here. Journal Finder, as I already mentioned, is where you can find a specific journal, right? So, you know, for example, I'm an anthropologist. So one that I often use is a journal called American Ethnologist, right? So I started typing it in and it already brought it up, right? So if I just want to look at this one journal, right? I can go and these are the databases we have that own it. So I'm just going to pick one of these, right? And this is going to show me just this one journal called American Ethnologist, like all the issues of it going back in time, right? So here it is. So I can browse. I mean, different journals are set up in different ways, right? But it has all of them. So if I just want to know, like, and then I can do a search within this journal if I want, or I can just sort of look at it, like, what's the most recent issue got in it, right? What's happening in this journal right now? Okay. So again, you may not use this, but it's another tool open to you. All right. And then the final thing is this. I mentioned this on the handout for this, the research guide. So the library, the Northeastern Library, there are librarians who are sort of in charge of all the different fields at the university, and they put together these research guides, which is to help students in a specific field, in a specific department, to do their work. So these are the guides. So the one that you want to look at for this project is Global Studies, right? Here it is, the Global Studies Research Guide. And there's a few things on here that are useful for you. One is you find out who the Global Studies librarian is. So Ashley is somebody who can help you if you, for example, are trying to find, you come up with a source, you try to, use interlibrary loan, it doesn't work, whatever. Or any other questions about the library, she can help you. If you have a question about the project, come to me. If you have a question about the library or something going on with your searches in the library, Ashley can help you, okay? So you learn that. And then the other thing is, there's this, page that shows you all kinds of sources related to finding stuff for your project. So here are some of the databases, right, that we were just looking at the list. Here's Academic Search Ultimate. We were just looking at that. So Ashley has put together a link to, or a list of links to various different databases that she thinks are relevant to the kind of work that global studies students might do. So this is just another page to know about. Again, it's right there. So this is, again, these are the 4 that I think you're going to be using. So this is the place to go to start and to continue with searching for scholarly sources for your paper. Okay, great. All right, so we've just talked about sort of how to use the library to find sources. Once you find those sources, you need to sort of evaluate them, meaning you need to figure out, like, you know, is this one a good one for my project? If so, like, how good is it or how relevant is it? So when you get, you know, you're probably going to start by just doing a bunch of searching and sort of pulling together a whole bunch of different sources, like different articles and books that seem like they're a good fit for your project. And then you want to sort of look at them, and what you're really looking for are the ones that are the best fit, right? So it doesn't mean you have to toss ones that are a little bit more removed, but it means you want to start to figure out, how does this fit into my project, right? What you're really looking for is quality, not quantity, right? I'd rather you find a smaller number of really good sources for your project than like a million different sources, some of which are not really that related to what you're doing. I've already mentioned that a good place to start is with existing review articles. So the Annual Reviews Journal, you can find that through that journal finder on the library, will help you get, again, sort of an overview of your subject often. And then the other kinds of sources you find, you want to start sort of sorting through them, right? So one way to sort through them is by sort of how relevant are they? You'll probably find a smaller number of sources that feel like they're like exactly on what you're interested in writing about, and others that are related, but they're maybe a little bit more off to the side. Again, keep all of those, but start to figure out which ones are sort of in the center and which ones are a little bit more tangential, okay? And then you can also sort of figure out or start to sort of classify them in terms of like, what is the nature of the relevant? Is it relevant because it's on your topic, or is it relevant because it does a kind of analysis that you also want to do, even if it's on a different topic, right? So it could be relevant in terms of its topic. It could be relevant in terms of the kind of theory that it uses. It could be relevant in terms of some of the data that's in there, right? So you want to, you know, again, just look at these sources and figure out what role would this source play in my project, okay? How do you figure that out? At this stage, I frankly would not suggest that you read every word of all the sources that you find. It takes too much time, and some of those you'll read the whole thing and you'll be like, well, that's not relevant. So you want to figure out a way to quickly scan a potential source and figure out if it's a good one for you, okay? Doing a once over, as I call it, is a good start. So that means read the title, right? Read the citation. Like, when was this written? If it was written in 1967, already you know that it's only going to be of limited use to you, right? It's too old, like it's out of date, right? Read, if many journal articles have an abstract, which is a little mini 1-paragraph summary of the article, which is super helpful, and it's there exactly for this reason. So you're not going to read the 20-page article. You're going to read that little paragraph, and then you're going to know, okay, I know basically what this article is about and what the person concludes or argues. And then you can tell, okay, this is relevant in this way, or this is not relevant, right? If you can't tell for real or for sure from the abstract, the other next step then to go even deeper into the article would be to read the introduction and the conclusion, right? Just the intro and conclusion. That should give you a good sense of what this article is about, okay? So what we're talking about here is skimming or scanning, right? So this is moving quickly through a piece of scholarship to figure out the gist of what it's about without reading every word. Ultimately, when you figure out your best sources, you will read every word, but you're not going to do that yet, because right now you're just trying to bring together the body of material that you'll be working from, okay? So at that later stage, you will do a deeper reading with note-taking, etc., but again, you're not quite there yet. So that's evaluating your sources once you've found them. Now, for this slide, this is just sort of a preview of where we're heading. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I wanted to put it up here and make it available to you. We'll talk about it in much more detail when we get closer to the literature review. what you will ultimately be doing once you assemble this sort of body of scholarship, right? Articles and books that you've looked at, you've scanned them, you've figured out they're relevant, and you know what they say, you're going to write what's called the literature review, which is basically reading all of those and writing a sort of it'll be an introductory part of your paper, of your, what ultimately becomes your final paper, that talks about, again, here's what scholars of this subject have had to say so far, right? The idea is to provide some background so that it helps the reader understand how your paper and your argument fits into the broader sort of set of things that people have said, okay? So you're going to read all of your sources. You're going to figure out what all those different authors say. And you're going to look for certain kinds of trends across all those sources. And the way that I talk about those trends is as patterns and moments. Patterns means when you read those, 10 or 20 different sources, you will probably find that some things keep coming up again and again across different authors, right? Either a bunch of the authors are saying something similar, or a bunch of the authors are all referencing one particular issue or moment in time. And those or you might find not that everybody says exactly the same thing, but a lot of people that you're reading reference a certain issue, but they take different positions on it, right? Those kinds of patterns are really valuable to identify because that will help you characterize the state of scholarship on your subject, right? Like authors in general have sort of come to X conclusion, or some authors argue this while others argue that, or there's a debate and there's sort of one school of thought on this side and one school of thought on the other side, okay? So those patterns are ultimately one of the things you're going to be looking for. The other thing I suggest that you look for that I think you'll find in the literature are what I'm calling moments. And those are not quite the same as patterns. So a moment is something sort of big that happens in the scholarship on your topic. Like it's a really important or landmark study that discovers something brand new, or somebody makes an argument that becomes like really significant in the field, or it shifts everybody's thinking on it, right? So that may not be a pattern. It may be more like a breakthrough or a change, right? Or it might be like a radical critique that encourages people to take a totally different approach to things, right? Whatever it is, it's something that sort of stands out in the scholarship for being an important moment in the trajectory or the timeline of that field, okay? You'll probably find more patterns than moments, but depending on the field, but you may find some of each. And again, as you're starting to read your sources, these are the kinds of things you'll be keeping an eye out for. When we get further into the process of writing a literature review, these patterns and moments will be the way that you organize what becomes your literature review, okay? So this is really, again, just a preview, like down the line. You don't need to do that right this second, but this is where we're heading. Okay. The final thing I want to note, for the way that you're citing things, starting with the proposal and throughout the course, you're going to be using the Chicago Manual of Style author date format for your citations, okay? In D2L, I've linked to descriptions of this style and like guidelines for this style. So you definitely want to read those documents that are linked, or one of them is like the Chicago Manual Style website, right? So if you're unfamiliar with it, even if you are familiar with it, make sure you look at those links to the Chicago Manual of Style author date and understand what it is. For the purposes of the proposal and sort of right now, the proposal, and then the next thing you're going to do is put together a bibliography of potential sources. All you need to know is that you're going to be using this format for those references, okay? And I've reproduced it here, right? This is what it looks like. This is like a generic one, like you do last name, comma, first name, period, then the year, etc., right? So, you can follow this, but even better is to go, again, to D2L, find the guide for Chicago Manual of Style, and use that. So right now, it's really straightforward. I just want you to, when you put your reference, like here's the scholarly source I found on my topic. I want you to put it into this format. All right, we're going to get in the habit of using this. Ultimately, when you write the final paper, you will be using Chicago Manual of Style for the citations within the text and the references at the end. Okay, so again, this is just, you know, sort of baby steps to get used to using that style. Anytime you give me a reference to the sources you'll be using, you're going to put it into this format. Okay. So I know I've thrown a lot at you. This is really, again, just to get you sort of up and running, both with, again, writing an initial proposal, refining that proposal, and then starting to plan for the next steps. As always, if you have any questions, let me know, and we'll talk again soon.